Welcome to, this is going to be a deep dive into a case that really shook a peaceful town, Hudson, Wisconsin. We're talking about the Hudson Funeral Home murders. And this is a story that starts in a place that, I imagine folks probably left their doors unlocked. And the biggest news was, the annual pie contest or something.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to overstate how shocking this case was for Hudson. I mean, we're talking about a town with no murders for over 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, none.
Wow.
It was unheard of.
And it gets even more disturbing when you consider the victims. We're talking about Dan O'Connell, the funeral director, and James Ellison, his young apprentice. And these weren't just names on a police report. These were really beloved members of the community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dan was practically an institution in Hudson. Dedicated family man, active in everything. You know, the kind of guy who'd give you the shirt off his back. And James, he was just starting out, full of dreams. Everyone said he had a real gift for comforting people, which makes this whole thing even more heartbreaking.
It does. It does. So walk us through that fateful February day. What did investigators find at the crime scene?
Okay, so picture this. It's a quiet Tuesday afternoon, funeral home seemingly empty, then chilling discovery. Both Dan and James are found in Dan's office. Shot, execution style.
Oh, wow.
No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no weapon. So right away, the police know this wasn't your average burglary gone wrong.
The sources mention a theory about formaldehyde theft being popular at the time. Now, why would that be connected to funeral homes?
So back then, there was this bizarre trend of criminals stealing formaldehyde from funeral homes. Seems they figured out it could be used to make certain illegal substances more potent, So naturally, the police look into that.
But that lead went nowhere, right?
Exactly. A thorough inventory showed nothing missing. And the more they dug into the crime scene, the more they realized this was personal, this was calculated. Whoever did this wanted Dan and James dead.
There was even a brief thought that maybe an escaped convict, Stephen Dwayne Neal, was hiding out in Hudson and might be involved. But that didn't pan out either, did it?
No. Neil was a dangerous man, wanted for a triple homicide. So the police had to consider every possibility, but again, there was just no evidence linking him to the funeral home murders.
The sources also bring up another unsolved case, the murder of a mortician named Boyd Novena in Iowa. Was there ever any solid connection?
Unfortunately, no. It was a detail that definitely raised eyebrows, especially since both Novena and Dan were targeted in seemingly motiveless attacks. But ultimately, it seems to have been a coincidence, a chilling reminder that sometimes even the most baffling crimes remain unsolved.
This case completely devastated Hudson. The sources described Dan's funeral as the largest the town had ever seen.
Yeah, over 1,000 people came to pay their respects. And it wasn't just out of obligation. You could feel the collective grief, the sense of disbelief that something so horrific could happen in their town to people everyone knew and loved.
And amidst all that grief, the police were left with a mountain of questions and very few answers. A year goes by, and then this seemingly unrelated report pops up, filed by someone calling himself Thomas Smith. He reports a priest, Father Ryan Erickson, for providing alcohol to minors and other inappropriate behavior. Typical small-town stuff, right?
You'd think so. But Detective Nobbs, one of the lead investigators, he was incredibly thorough. He had this habit of combing through even the most seemingly insignificant reports, just in case. And there was something about this Thomas Smith report, something about Father Erickson's name, that caught his eye.
Now, why would a priest's name in a minor incident report be a red flag in a double homicide case?
Because Father Erickson just happened to be the priest at Dan O'Connell's church. That seemingly random connection, it changed everything. It was like a crack in the case had suddenly become a gaping hole, and it led the investigators down a path they never could have anticipated.
So who was Father Erickson? The sources paint a pretty disturbing picture, to say the least.
Yeah, on the surface, he was a respected priest, a pillar of the community. But, as the police started digging, a much darker picture emerged. His extreme views, his unhealthy fixation on sexual sin, even his treatment of animals, it all hinted at a deeply troubled individual hiding beneath his veneer of piety.
The sources also mention some truly creepy stuff, like a racist poem found in his rectory and those disturbing Post-it notes with bizarre phrases on them.
It was like peering into the mind of someone struggling with their own demons. And then there was the hidden folder on his computer.
Containing explicit images.
Yes, images that left no doubt about his predatory nature. It became clear that Father Erickson was a man who used his position of power to exploit and abuse the vulnerable.
And the fact that he was allowed to continue serving as a priest despite these red flags is just mind-boggling. It makes you wonder what the church knew and when they knew it.
Right. This was around the time, the Boston Globe expose was rocking the Catholic Church. It was revealing a widespread pattern of sexual abuse and cover-ups that had been going on for decades. Hundreds of priests were implicated, and the church was facing a crisis of epic proportions.
So this case in Hudson wasn't just a local tragedy. It was part of a much larger and deeply disturbing story.
Exactly. And for the families of Dan and James, it was a double blow. Not only had they lost their loved ones in a horrific crime, but they were now forced to confront the possibility that those crimes were connected to a systemic failure within the church, a failure to protect the innocent.
The sources detailed the families' fight for answers and accountability. Both families filed lawsuits, but they took very different approaches, didn't they?
They did. Sally and Cass and Ellison, devout Lutherans, they focused on pushing for reform within the church. They wanted to ensure that what happened to James would never happen to another child. They met with Bishop Fliss, the head of the diocese, and presented him with a detailed plan for change. Sadly, despite initial promises, little was actually done.
And the O'Connells.
They took a more aggressive approach. They filed a lawsuit against hundreds of bishops across the country, demanding that the church release the names and locations of all priests accused of abuse.
It sounds like they were trying to force the church to confront its past and take real action to protect children.
They were. But the church fought back, arguing that releasing such information would violate their First Amendment rights.
And they won.
Yes, the lawsuit was ultimately dismissed, but the fight for accountability didn't end there.
What happened next?
Well, the John Doe hearing, it had a ripple effect. Several more individuals came forward with allegations against Father Erickson, each story adding another layer of pain and outrage to the already devastating situation. It became clear that this wasn't just a case of one bad apple. It was a symptom of a much deeper problem within the church, a problem that extended far beyond Hudson, Wisconsin.
It's heartbreaking to think about all the lives that were impacted by Father Erickson's actions, all the pain that could have been prevented if the church had taken action sooner.
You're right. And while the John Doe hearing officially closed the murder investigation, it opened up a whole new chapter in the family's fight for justice and healing, a chapter that continues to this day.
It's clear that this case had a profound impact, not just on the families directly involved, but on the entire community of Hudson. How did they begin to heal and move forward after something so horrific?
Well, it wasn't easy, but amidst the grief and anger, there was also a remarkable display of resilience. The sources describe the community rallying around the families, offering support, sharing stories, and finding ways to honor the memory of Dan and James.
The Ellisons, despite their own immense pain, found a way to channel their grief into positive action. They created a foundation in James's name dedicated to preventing child sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's a testament to their deep faith and their belief that even out of the darkest tragedy, something good can emerge. Sally Ellison often spoke about how important it was to her to find ways to help others who were struggling with similar pain.
What's fascinating is that their faith, rather than being shattered by this experience, actually seemed to deepen. The sources mention how they even found solace attending a Catholic Mass in Ireland years later.
It speaks to their capacity for forgiveness and their understanding that the actions of one individual don't represent an entire faith.
The O'Connells, on the other hand, they took a different path. Jenny, Dan's wife, actually ended up working for the Hudson Police Department.
It's almost as if she felt a need to be part of the solution, to contribute to creating a safer community. Her work with the police became her way of honoring Dan's memory and ensuring that something positive came out of such a senseless loss.
And then there's the memorial garden dedicated to Dan at the funeral home. It sounds like a truly special place.
It is. It's a peaceful oasis in the midst of town, a place where people can go to reflect and remember. The inscription on the limestone rock, the prayer of St. Francis, is particularly poignant. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy.
It's a powerful message of healing and reconciliation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and love can prevail.
And it speaks to the enduring legacy of Dan O'Connell, a man who dedicated his life to bringing comfort to others. Even in death, he continues to inspire those who knew him.
So, as we conclude our deep dive into the Hudson Funeral Home murders, what are the key takeaways? What can we as listeners learn from this tragedy?
This case, it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the nature of evil and the abuse of power. It's a reminder that darkness can lurk in unexpected places, even within institutions we hold in high regard.
It also highlights the importance of listening to survivors, of believing their stories, and of holding those in power accountable for their actions.
But perhaps most importantly, it reminds us of the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of immense tragedy, there is always hope, always the possibility of healing, and and always the potential for good to emerge from darkness.
The story of the Hudson Funeral Home murders is a tragedy, yes, but it's also a testament to the enduring power of community, faith, and the human spirit's capacity for love and forgiveness. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.